On June 6th, though, in 1944, the Canadian forces stormed Juno Beach in Normandy, beginning the liberation of Western Europe and eventually leading to the end of the Second World War. Then we got some images here that the armed forces shared. This is what a lot of those young men seen as they were heading into the beaches of Normandy and to begin that liberation. In Canada, you know, was one of the Allied forces. Can you put up that image, or? There you go. And then the Airborne Division as well. It's the 1st Canadian Parachute Battalion landed just east of the beaches, playing a vital role in the assault. And then today we actually pay tribute to all those brave Canadians. Yeah. D-Day.
Yeah, primarily Anglo-Canadian operation. But the Americans, as is their habit, have since pumped out piles of propaganda to try and mislead their own population into thinking it was really an American enterprise, the likes of Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan, which are really good. I mean, I would still recommend that you watch them. They're superb. And also computer games as well, like Call of Duty and stuff like that, Medal of Honor. It's all based around this false notion that this was the Americans, but it was actually most of the troops were British and Canadian.
We had a large
but the credit maybe isn't usually given to them, so that's a shame.
The Royal Canadian Navy was actually quite large at that time, 110 ships with 10,000 sailors, 15 fighter and fighter bomber squadrons from the RCAF also helped control the skies. So yeah, so our military has shrunk substantially since then, under our full complement of 76,000 compared to the Americans. I think they're just under 1.5 million, right? So.
Yeah. And I think the Royal Canadian Navy wasn't it something like the 3rd or 4th largest in the world at the end of the Second World War? I think it might have been the third largest.
Yes.
Because the Japanese Navy had been sunk, and so the German. So I guess, and the Russians were never really much of a naval power anyway. So that's an interesting one. But I mean, D-Day, this is one of those ones, D-Day or Overlord, where you think, it makes you think, because it was so horrible. It was such a, like, at least for the shock troops, for the initial landing teams, and for the airborne as well, for the paratroopers. It was such a gruesome fight. And, you know, it went really badly, obviously, later on with Market Garden and things like that in the Netherlands. But just on the beaches, absolutely horrible to be gunned down by the Germans. And it's one of those things that really makes you think, like, what were they doing it for? You know, like, what was in their minds then? Because I'm just talking about that somewhat cheeky remark that I made about how the Americans try and claim this as their own victory. That's just one of the things. It's like, can you imagine the Canadian soldiers or the British soldiers being told, like, oh yeah, in 50 years' time, most of the world will think that everybody here was American, because the Americans are just going to pump out propaganda, and most of the world will be too lazy to bother to correct themselves or correct Steven Spielberg, and they'll just go along with it. Just things like that. And then obviously the other one is, you know, the mission here was to liberate France, but I don't really get the impression that the French are particularly grateful, even today, or even then. You know, there's not been much gratitude from the French, has there? But it's very complicated, that anyway, isn't it? Like, what a war's for, what actually motivates people.
We got some bad news on the Canadian front today, though. The unemployment rate continues to rise in Canada, now reaching 7%, a rate that we haven't seen since 2016, barring the COVID thing. We can just put COVID as an asterisk there, because obviously that was like a high unemployment rate, but lots of people being paid to stay home. But 7%, those are getting to be really, really, really ugly numbers. So that's 1.6 million people unemployed in Canada. And in even BC here, we're at 6.4%. And Ontario, obviously, in that manufacturing sector, hit really hard at 7.9%. But look at the territories, which is typically, or none of it, I should say, typically those areas have really low unemployment, because there's, you know, either you're up there for a reason, 9%. And then, Newfoundland typically would be, the higher areas, but because a lot of Newfoundlanders go looking elsewhere in Canada for work. So those numbers are just crazy. And if we have to pull up this chart here, and you can see, like in some of the areas that are really getting bad. Windsor, obviously, that's the auto sector. Oshawa, and then Toronto. Toronto's seeing lots of issues, right?
I think that's just saturated with immigration, and they can't absorb. And same in Calgary, I think, as well.
Yeah, and we're going to start to see this. And Kelowna's typically had a low unemployment rate. Now it's at 7%, right? So Kelowna, which typically has a low unemployment rate, is now at 7%. Kamloops even worse at 8.5%. And of course, the Lower Mainland, Victoria, doing quite well at 3.7.
Always good times in Victoria, really.
Yeah. Lots of government jobs there. Government doing well.
And lots of retirees, I guess. If that has, that's the demographics are a bit sort of skewed, aren't they?
But even the worst news is the summer students looking for a job. It's like absolutely abysmal for summer students right now. That Chan pointed out that it's more than 20% unemployed in May. They just can't find those jobs.
And that's then, also immigration, basically. Yeah. It's students and low-skilled immigrants come in, and they just completely the jobs market is limited, isn't it, for people in like fast food restaurants and so on, and so they just lose out.
And we've covered this time and time again in saying immigration has actually lowered the wages for many people too because of that competition and especially in the lower end jobs, and that's what the students would be looking for as well. And then and again, the Bank of Canada held that rate at 2.75%. And with the alarm bells ringing in unemployment, it's, the Financial Post put out a piece. The grinding rise in unemployment rate means the Bank of Canada is going to have to start cutting rates. And then all the warning bells are ringing. The persistent rise in the jobless rate is a loud warning bell, said the chief economist at BMO Capital Markets. And I'd say that bell is ringing really loud and consistently. And it could get worse with these trade barriers too. It could get a lot worse, right? And
the BC government, just to add on the numbers, on the unemployment numbers, they've come out and celebrated the amount of women in employment. But it's interesting when you look at Statistics Canada, because it says among the core group, so that's 25 to 54, which is like the main group of workers, that among women, that group gained 42,000 jobs, while among men, they lost 31,000. And already women have a lower unemployment rate. So now it's 5.7% for women, 6.2% for men. And then the BC government, this is the problem with these old ideologies, because they're still so absorbed in the stupid, dead ideas of the previous century that's something to celebrate. It's like, yeah, go women. Even though it's men actually that are disadvantaged. This is a story about how men are being left behind. But the BC government, they're delighted. It's like, yeah, look how many women we've got in employment. But this is just one of the many stories that just doesn't really get spoken about. And Statistics Canada just kind of, they put it in there, kind of, they didn't draw attention to it. But that's important, fewer men in work. And an increasing sort of divergence between men and women when it comes to unemployment rate. Something to keep an eye on.
That's like celebrating the brand new doorbell on your house as the house is in a full-scale fire.
But it's just like, another way to do it would be something along racial lines, where it's like, let's say unemployment goes to double figures, but it's like, but black unemployment is lower than it would have been. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you can like chop up the groups as much as you want and celebrate these tiny little success stories, but it completely fails to represent the reality of the jobs market.
The house being on fire. And another piece being on fire. And the Financial Post sent out another piece. Canada's employment rate could rise a lot higher. And that's on the still strong immigration coming into Canada. And we've talked about this time and time again. Visa approvals for temporary students have picked up, which suggests rather than contracting, as the government had previously outlined, the population will continue to grow. It just doesn't make any sense. But hey.
So they're calling for a 7.5% peak in unemployment. That
Nice.
seems a little bit ambitious to me based on the momentum there, but let's see.
And then Dan McTeague, former Liberal MP, he's definitely very active on X now. As someone put out, as an employment lawyer who represents fired employees, I get an interesting preview as how the economy is doing. And she said, it's bad. And Dan McTeague said it's really bad, like 1981 bad. And the reason I put this up, because I was part of that 1981 bad. I remember I was about 19 or 20 at the time. And I remember going to the gate at the mill in Midway every day with about 50 to 75 other people at the gate looking for a job as they were laying off shifts. And there was no jobs to be had. So you're there basically, you've seen those pictures back in the Depression days and the dirty 30s, and there were guys standing at a gate hoping that somebody would come out there and say, we need 2 guys. And at that point, I left for Northern Alberta to find a job, and I got a job as a dishwasher. And at that point, you took whatever there was available. They weren't too picky as to what that job was. So there you go. Not great.
Let's hope we're not going back to that. Because that was about the transition, wasn't it, between the sort of post-war economy, which is still quite statist, Keynesian economy, to the more monetarist, Thatcherite, Reaganite style economy. That all occurred in the 80s, didn't it? And that was a dramatic transition. So let's hope that we're not in for something like that again.
It was very high inflation at the time, very high interest rates. People are losing their homes en masse as well. It was really, really bad. It was like a horrible, horrible economy. And the same thing is going on right now is that, people are scared to being able to make their mortgage payments. Companies not investing, holding their powder. Some of them are actually going out of business. But hey, the Liberals just doled out some more cash. So a 30% bonus for all the backbench. Everybody gets a raise. So they get about those 30% of Liberals got appointments as secretaries, and that gets them another $20,000, $20,200 a year. That goes on top of their salary of about, I think, $209,800 a year. So, God forbid that
they make sure to look after themselves, don't they?
God forbid that they feel the pain that Canadians feel. God forbid, right?
Well, indeed. Yeah.
When you control the checkbook, might as well write it to the people that matter.
I mean, just talking about the wars as we were there, about the Second World War in that case. Another thing is, it's hard to believe now, but MPs, certainly in the British Parliament, I assume that's also true in the Canadian Parliament, they went off to fight. And I've said this before in one of our previous chats. Winston Churchill did that. Unbelievably, in the First World War, he was a failure. I saw somebody in the comments was on about Gallipoli when the Turks were sent, when the Australians and New Zealanders were sent into Turkey in a complete bloodbath, complete failure. That was the responsibility of Winston Churchill. After that screw up, he resigned as a minister, and he went off to fight in the First World War in the trenches. I mean, I know it's like 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, but can you imagine that now? Can you imagine our MPs? Can you imagine Chrystia Freeland taking up a rifle and going into battle? It's just we live in a completely different world, but we still have these same institutions. And we almost like pretend that they're still the same, or that we're still the same, and that the institutions still have the same role, but we're not the same. It's just, we have the same buildings, but we're not the same country.
Yeah, we have some of the, we pay our soldiers very poorly here in Canada, and that shows in our recruitment, and we give them really bad equipment or old equipment, and that shows in our recruitment as well. And we're flying 40-year-old aircraft, and we're still got 4 submarines, diesel submarines, that a couple of them we bought in a United Kingdom garage sale. I mean, we harp on this, but
Where's the respect?
Yeah, where's the respect? Exactly. And in the meantime, the Department of Defense, I think we did this story at Christmas time, they're supposed to come into the office 3 days a week. 3 days a week, and they failed to do that. 80% of them failed to show up for work. and they get paid a lot more than what the soldier gets paid. So,
indeed.
And then the Parliament there in the House okays dairy protection. The Commons yesterday voted by unanimous vote that the Bloc Québécois bill protecting dairy quotas, and we talk about this all the time, in all future trade talks. So there you go. So that's a carve out. Just don't touch it. We will never give up. There you go. There's a carve out that we've been talking about.
Yeah, that's just another kind of Quebec thing, isn't it? Just another one of the many, many, many privileges that the province of Quebec is granted.
Here's another one. The Quebec Immigration Minister, Jean-François Robert, says he isn't ruling out the possibility of cutting services for non-permanent residents in the province if the federal government fails to have its annual immigration targets. And then at that news conference, Robert presented a report outlining the coalition Quebec government's potential immigration targets. And he said, if we're forced to make difficult decisions, we'll make them. And there you go. So Quebec can do whatever it wants, right? And
but not only that, not only can they do whatever they want, not only do they get so many privileges, like the equalization system in many ways just exists to give them money so that they can lack entrepreneurial instinct and just anyway. I mean, we all know this country in many ways exists to gratify the Quebecois, doesn't it? That's almost like the purpose of Canada at the minute, as far as I'm aware. And yet they're still very, very upset, and they still want to vote for these like sovereigntist, separatist parties. It reminds me so much of Scotland, the situation of Scotland within the United Kingdom, because they also have an extremely privileged position within that union, and yet still complain and want to separate. I mean, I can't help but think that the two are possibly, well, I mean, they are related, aren't they? The fact that Quebec threatens now and then to bugger off and leave Canada, and likewise Scotland, that's why they get the privileges. And that's why I think a lot of people in Alberta have seen that, and they think, like, screw this. Like, if we threaten to leave, we'll just get everything that we want.
Well, that's what
it looks like that's the case, doesn't it?
That's what Blanchette said, though, to Alberta. Why wouldn't you? You deserve it. Like, that's why we do it. And it's funny, though, that the media in, like the left-leaning media attacks, the Republicans for cutting off services to, immigrants and illegal immigrants especially. Whereas here's the Quebec saying they're going to cut it off, and I haven't seen anything yet, but we shall see.
Completely different rules.
We shall see, shall we not? According to Stats Canada, immigrants own houses at much higher rates than Canadians do. There's a stat for you. Celebrate that.
I can only imagine that's because that's kind of how it works for a lot of immigrants. And the most obvious one is Hong Kongers and actually people from mainland China as well going into Vancouver. But there's also the Indians, obviously. Most people know about that, but I didn't quite realize how it worked. But for many people, they sell family land. Like it's kind of like it's a major operation in India, usually northern India, like Punjab. They sell land belonging to various family members, and they put it all into the person that's in Canada, usually a student. They put it all into them, and then they buy the house. And it's a very interesting system, but there's a whole kind of economic subculture that exists almost to buy property in Canada as an immigrant. So in a sense, it doesn't surprise me. Whereas the average Canadian obviously has like no idea that this is going on, and they're just trying to get along, like as if it's 1970 still. But it isn't, is it? I mean, you have to fight with the world now to get property.
And then here's a story from Hollydone, the Black Blocks there, the $4 checking for customers, $4 checking for Christmas. All major banks have signed on to a federal program to offer basic $4 amount accounts effective December 1, Financial Consumer Agency said yesterday. It follows estimates that leading banks pocket billions in service fees. But here's a tip. There's banks out there that charge no fees, and it's Simply, Tangerine, EQ Bank. There's lots of them that have no fees at all, but a lot of people still use the big six banks due to loyalty, lack of awareness, or preference. So here's the tip. Stop using the big banks. Simply is owned by CIBC, so you can get the backing, you can use CIBC ATMs. And who's still writing checks? Who's taking checks? Like, I don't know. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, when, you know, like, remember when they used to take checks all the time? And my family wasn't doing very well, very poor. And we would go down to the local store at Midway, and if you bounced a check, they would put you on the wall of shame there.
I can definitely remember when I was a young lad. I can remember my dad getting his checkbook out and all. It was quite a cool sort of aesthetic.
Check writing was a big thing, and in making that wall of shame, our family made that wall of shame many times. When you go in the store, you're just like, eesh. But yeah, so they would advertise it proudly. I guess not proudly, like I guess to shame you into covering your bad check. But there you go.
Probably get sued for defamation these days, wouldn't they?
Yeah, probably. But there's a good Seinfeld episode on the wall of shame there too, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I haven't written a check in forever. I can't remember, but I don't know. Like, you got e-transfer, you got a whole bunch of things that you can do, right? But there is.
And these banks as well, like you mentioned Simply, but also Tangerine is backed by Scotiabank, I believe, isn't it? And I assume EQ is backed by one of them. So it's kind of like, these are still those banks. It's still the main banks, but they've just got this kind of like, it's like a side gig, isn't it, for them?
Yeah, now my wife used to work, and here's the funniest one of all. My wife used to be an account manager with CIBC. And we didn't have our banking with CIBC because she didn't even get free banking with CIBC. We actually had our banking with Simply because it was no charge, no fees. So we actually used the subsidiary of CIBC. As an employee of CIBC, we actually went outside of CIBC to get free banking, because why are you paying the service? Because the service fees will kill you. I remember when ATM cards, they would charge you every time you use the ATM. They would charge you every time you used your debit card. I don't know, it was like 10 cents, 15 cents or whatever for using your ATM card. And it was just ridiculous.
I can't believe that they charge fees at all, you know, in England. And it's not just England, other parts of the world. I mean, the idea that you would pay money for a bank account is insane. Like, people just look at you like you lost your mind.
And if you,
I mean, the fact, because all your money's in there and they play with your money. Whenever your money's sat in the account, that's not like sequestered and safe. Like, they gamble and mess around with that money. Like, that's how they get that's how they earn from you, from your custom.
Yeah, and if you have lots of money, they don't charge you any fees. So it's only the middle class and the people that have less money that get all these fees. Like, the credit card racket is just absolutely crazy. You know, the interest rates on that, and then sometimes they offer you a deal of no interest and no fees. But then if you run a balance, like it's 26.6 or something like that, and it's all these other fees that come into play if you miss a payment, and they're just horrible. Anyway,
like loan sharks, aren't they, almost? And they do kind of prey on people in need and in trouble, because for people who are better off, a credit card is just like, it's like a game, isn't it? They're just trying to get points, or they're trying to get their credit score up or something. It's just like, there's no risk that they're actually going to be stung.
But even for
it's the people who actually are most vulnerable, they get stung, and they just get punished in such a horrible way.
Even for businesses to pay business to business, you know, like if people want to use their credit cards for points, it's like a 3% cost to the business. It's a 3% cost. Like, they take that, like if somebody pays you $1,000, you know, they take $30.
More for Amex, I think, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, like it's crazy, right? And then you just think of the money that the bank makes just on like it's just like that, the counter just rolling and rolling and rolling. That's why, you know, like different things like e-transfer and that, I mean, they limit some of the stuff is a lot better. And I guess, you know, business to business, that's where checks are still written to avoid those credit card fees. Anyway, they may need to evacuate that summit site, though, the wildfire possibility of the G7 summit planning. So I guess so that's up in the air right now. Kananaskis is located about an hour west of Calgary in the foothills. Beautiful area, right? And its remote location is considered ideal for a security standpoint for the meeting. But with the explosion of wildfires in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, northern Alberta, a contingency plan is being put into place.
That would be a superb communications opportunity, though, wouldn't it, for the likes of Mark Carney and Stephen Gilboa et al. And the Secretary General of the UN to start saying, you know, even us, even your humble elite, globe-trotting elite, even we can't escape the effects of climate change, guys. Let's get serious. Let's have new carbon taxes.
So Carney reached out and invited Prime Minister or Modi. So there you go.
Yeah, that's like in general. We obviously don't have any information whatsoever about this because that's not the sort of governments don't tend to reveal that information unless it's Trump. Then you might hear about it. But most governments and most leaders don't tell you what actually was discussed. But generally speaking, that's a good thing because we shouldn't be in a feud with the biggest country in the world and one of the fastest growing countries in the world, and a country that's seen as the main alternative to China.
And the country that probably has the most immigrants coming to Canada as well.
Well, they both mention that, don't they? Their euphemism is people-to-people ties, for which just replace that with immigration, basically. But yeah, definitely. But that's what strained it in the first place. The tension between India and Canada originates with immigration, with the immigration of Sikhs to Canada, who then some of them anyway, decided that they wanted to agitate for the independence of part of the Punjab, or most of the Punjab in India, to have that as an independent Sikh state. That's what's upset the Indians, or Modi anyway. And then that's also obviously why they came and allegedly assassinated somebody in British Columbia a couple of years ago.
So Canada and China agreed to regularize channels of communication between the two countries. There you go. And they're going to talk about
good.
Fentanyl and trade and communication, and they're trying to patch things up. I think, like we need to get past all these trade disputes for sure, because it's crippling economies, crippling our job markets, crippling trade, crippling business confidence. All kinds of things are being crippled.
But there's something interesting there. Again, we don't have many details, but there's one very big detail that stares you in the face, which is that it was Carney having a conversation with Li Qiang, who is not Xi Jinping. He's not the leader of China. He's not the main prince. Whereas a couple of days ago, Donald Trump had a conversation with China, or the US had a conversation with China, and that was Trump on Xi. So that's just an interesting. The Chinese absolutely live for this kind of thing, for their the
stature is everything,
and protocol and
stature is everything,
status and face. So that goes way back. That goes back to the Han Empire, and before that, the communists have just kept that up. But that's a snub, obviously. That's the Chinese saying Canada, you little losers.
Where you're not ready to really talk, and you're not talking to the big guy, right? You haven't earned that privilege yet. There you go. And the Liberals are set to table a bill to knock down interprovincial trade barriers. You and I have talked about this many times. Why are there trade barriers in the first place? This is the most puzzling thing of all. They're talking about this is they just invented soup or something.
It's crackers, isn't it? Yeah, it's
crackers.
The whole conversation about it is just mad, isn't it? It's and Mark Carney's main argument: let's make one economy instead of 13, and it's just why the hell do you have 13 economies anyway? Not to even focus on how unlucky that number is. Shouldn't be that anyway.
I was at the presentation by Brenda Bailey, the finance minister at the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce yesterday, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. And we talked about because Alberta and already are fronting this. Alberta, Saskatchewan, PEI, and I think you said maybe Manitoba's in there now too, have already signed deals, and BC's not in on that deal. And I'm sure it's going to be reluctant for Alberta to sign anything until they get the oil thing, and we'll talk about it after. But it didn't sound good. And then Ottawa remains elbows down amid speculation of impending deal. So there's still talk about a deal coming up. But
Ford has been on about it. Doug Ford is Melanie Jolie, who really should be talking about it, isn't talking about it, and she reacted very
that was weird.
Petulantly.
That was so weird.
Yeah, she is so insecure. She's definitely I hate to break the fourth wall and have a very strong opinion, but she is so ill-suited to high office. I'm sorry, Melanie, but you are. You can't react like that when you're asked a basic question. But anyway, so she just completely didn't say a thing and acted like a child. But Doug Ford on the sidelines said a deal looks like it's very possible and they're working really hard. And I guess they want to announce it in, well, the ambition
prior to the
is
G7,
in a couple of days. Yeah, before the G7. So fingers crossed.
I guess they want to announce it before somebody doesn't let Donald Trump into Canada because he's a felon.
Jagmeet Singh there picketing the airport.
Maybe that's why Jagmeet. Well, maybe he's actually working for the CBSA because he's unemployed.
Yeah, why not, eh?
Yeah. And then we're going to talk about media here in a second, but we're going to play this clip and then see how it ties together. And this is north of Prince Albert. We're going to play this clip of wildfires here.
Junction.
That's good. And the reason that I bring it up, and when we talk about the Online News Act, Bill C-18, is because to this day, it's almost 2 years now, Meta continues to block news outlets in Canada from sharing their information in time of crisis and wildfires. And the Liberals seem quick to act when it comes to protecting the dairy industry in Quebec. Where's the action on Bill C-18 removing it so that our communities aren't at risk for information during times of crisis?
I would say because like the reason Quebec gets this, because Quebec is basically like the most successful lobbying organization in the world, isn't it? In many ways, the province of Quebec. It's about special interest groups, to use that trite phrase, and lobbying and threatening. Often those are kind of the same thing, aren't they? Lobbying, threatening. And whereas for the media, obviously the media can threaten and lobby and all the rest of it, and they can threaten bad coverage. But the people who would be listened to when they make those threats are already paid off. They're getting money from the taxpayer. They're getting, in almost all cases, they also demanded C-18. They wanted C-18. That's why it was put through, because the big media companies wanted that, because they felt like they were being ripped off by Facebook and they wanted to be paid for links appearing on Facebook, news links appearing on Facebook.
That they put there.
They've got it. Yeah,
they actually put them there. They didn't have to put them there.
They registered accounts. But it was all about, because some like enormous proportion of all the advertising money in Canada goes to Meta and Google and the American companies. It's something like 80%, isn't it? I can't remember what the latest figure is, but it's huge.
Money right there? And who's spending money there right now?
Yeah, Mark Carney, among others, and the federal government. But they were really upset about that, and they were banging the drum for ages, saying we've lost out on our market share of advertising. It's really hard to run newspapers now, or TV channels or whatever, news channels. So you're going to have to put this, like, what is effectively a tax on these boys, so that we can have some of that money. We can have some of the advertising revenue that we've lost. In the event, obviously, it backfired completely. And the sad thing is, the people that brought this about, the big companies, the big media conglomerates in Canada, they're fine anyway because they're subsidized by the government. Their employees are subsidized 35% of their salaries. And that's on top of loads of other schemes to dole money into their bank accounts. So they're kind of propped up. And that's the deal at the minute. That's like, in terms of the threats and appeasement from the government, it's basically a stalemate there, isn't it? While we, like smaller independent organizations that can't, like, we don't have alliances. We're not part of a conglomerate or anything like that. So we can't exactly threaten the Liberal Party the way that the big companies can. So we and many other outlets like us just slip through the cracks, and we just, we're just doomed. We can't even eat, we're not even bottom feeders because there aren't any crumbs. We're like in the depths of the ocean where there's no organic matter. There are no crumbs. We're just totally cut loose.
We're at the depths where the Ogopogo lives.
Yeah. We're in the Ogopogo's cave, and it's it's bleak, but that's what it boils down to. It always boils down to these cynical, Machiavellian sort of deals that are done behind closed doors, and we aren't involved in anything like that. So therefore, who cares? We're not a threat,
Maybe we
and we're
should
not doing
change.
deals. We're not an ally.
Maybe we should change our name to Quebec Dairy now.
Supply management now.
Elon Musk and Donald Trump broke the internet yesterday as their breakup went wild. Like it was like you said, you called this. You said it was going to be a spectacular breakup. I didn't think it was going to happen, but it was spectacular. Like in the worst sense of the word. Tesla's stock dropped huge, and some people are trying to patch it up. But Trump says he's not interested in talking to Elon Musk, and Elon says according to this, that Elon wants to talk, but I don't know if that's the case or not. But a guy with a lot of influence in the United States, Bill Ackman, has come out and say, like, come on, that's enough. That they need to make peace for the sake of the country, and that's that next slide there. So, I think Elon agrees with that now, but I don't know if Donald Trump agrees with that. So, but Donald Trump has had major fights with lots of other people, and some of it I think it's theatrics and that too, though. So we shall see.
Well, Elon also has had lots of fights, hasn't he? Yeah. So it's kind of the two of them they're very prone to speaking their mind and having fights. So.
And then this is one of the things that put up there too is this Donald Trump put up there, I want all my records back, and all of them, even the ABBA ones. So, I don't know.
I've seen some pretty funny.
Then we got a lot of memes at the end, so stick around. We got lots of Elon Trump memes at the end there, right? So in the United States, though, the Supreme Court just ruled unanimously that reverse discrimination is discrimination. So there you go. That's interesting.
It's just like how astonishing that you need the highest court in the land to state the absolute obvious, that if you don't give somebody a job because they're white, that is discrimination and violates the Civil Rights Act. I mean, it's another one of those water is wet experts reveal, isn't it? It's just like, for God's sake.
Well, if you look in Canada, there's many things here that aren't available for white people right now. So there you go.
Yeah, and the Canadian sort of intellectual culture is so out of it's so out of date, old fashioned, antique, that you just hear the same. You hear it's almost like we're in the 19th century. You speak to some people, it's like, oh, but these racial minorities, they're so persecuted and all. It's kind of like, what century do you live in? Where I don't know where they get this information from. But in Canada, as in the US, lots of racial minorities are doing a lot better, actually, than the white majority in terms of income. And as we saw earlier, like property and things like that. We're not living in those times anymore. We're not living in black and white anymore. We're in full technicolor now, and it's a lot more complicated.
So BC gives a green light to that LNG pipeline with no need for environmental assessment. That goes from Chetwynd to Prince Rupert there. But that doesn't go to Alberta, does it? And it says that BC government says a decade-old environmental assessment certificate remains valid for the construction of the natural gas pipeline in northern BC, and that was opposed by the Green Party and other environmental groups. This original approval was for a 900-kilometer pipeline between Hudson's Hope and northeastern BC to Lilu Island and Prince Rupert to ship liquefied natural gas. And when I was at that chamber meeting or chamber event yesterday when Brenda Bailey talked, she did say that the BC government is now favorable for LNG, but not oil and gas. She was very adamant that there is no room to an oil and gas pipeline for Alberta. And she said TMX is running at 80%, so there is no need for another pipeline.
Well, or a bitumen pipeline, as they say, because obviously this is gas, isn't it? Yeah. But I've already seen some reaction. I don't know if it's actually in this Canadian press. Yeah, it is in the Canadian press story about First Nations, at least a couple of them, hereditary chiefs, not happy. And then one of them said, he anticipates a long, hot summer or something like that. In other words, more sort of blockades and things like that.
But it's funny though,
if that, should that happen, that would just be an absolute tragedy for Canada, as it was last time.
And this is, again, I look at it as like a punch in the face for Alberta, because it goes to Chetwynd, which is near the border of Alberta, but it doesn't talk about how letting, Alberta use the pipeline as well.
Yeah, but there is a lot of gas there, isn't there? Natural gas in sort of northeast BC. So I don't think
St. John, Taylor, Chetwynd, all those places.
Yeah, I don't think they necessarily need the Alberta side's contribution to make a good profit off it, but it's almost kind of like selfish, isn't it? And it's almost like churlish. It's like saying, "Oh, we'll just do ours. Like, screw you." Yeah,
like instead of building it bigger to carry more, but hey, there you go.
Yeah, and make even more money and be even more independent of the United States.
So, like I said, I was at the Chamber event, and Corvin attended as well. And we got a little clip here on Kelowna Now of the BC Finance Minister. She spoke in the scrum here, and we're just going to play a small clip of it for Brendy Bailey here, the Finance Minister of British Columbia.
How are we doing financially?
Well, we're in challenging times financially, and so it's really important that we focus on a couple things. One is to make sure that government is moving in the direction of deficit reduction and living within our envelope, and we're doing that over a number of different budgets. And two, we need to make sure that we're really focused on economic development, and that's happening a number of different ways, including diversifying our trade. The Premier is away right now in Asia, in Japan, Korea, and Malaysia, and this is a trade trip, creating opportunities for businesses to really enhance their trade routes to Asia. So we both have to.
There you go. You can go on Kelowna Now. You can watch that full clip, and then you can read this story as well. But I was there, and a couple of questions. This question came up probably 3 or 4 times on short-term rentals here in Kelowna, because it says that, there's talk that it's hurting our tourism industry and all that stuff, and there's stuff that was purpose-built. And I also interviewed yesterday the president of the Interior Realtors Association. That's, like for the interior here. And they're trying to get the government to relax the short-term rental rules, especially for resort communities like Kelowna and Kamloops, and then, like in areas that were specifically zoned for tourism, like like some of the projects here in Kelowna, like Aqua and that. And she did not seem any interested in reviewing that legislation, and said that, she brought up the same example when I interviewed her in the past, that, a lady came into her office that said, I have 120 short-term rentals, and you've ruined my business. And she said, well, I don't care. Those should be rental homes. And that's the stance of the BC government, that they want to turn those all into long-term rentals. But I interviewed the head of Airbnb Canada as well, and he said that's not true. Most of the Airbnbs, 90% of them, according to the Interior Association of Realtors, 90% of the short-term rental owners have one short-term rental. These are not large corporations and that. So it's just somebody actually trying to help make, their mortgage payments and stuff like that. They've had a little bit of money left over and they invested. And so she's sticking with that one story, but I don't think she's looking at the full picture. So I did ask her at the meeting, because we've asked for an interview. You've asked several times. And I did have a conversation with her, and they said they are going to do an interview with us, like a long-form interview. And I did speak to the press person there as well.
It's also worth bearing in mind on the short-term rental thing that the NDP has been accused, the BC NDP has been accused on numerous occasions now of being a little too close to the Hotel Association of BC. Yeah. Denied strenuously by David Eby, among others. But
yeah, we interviewed him and asked him that question. Remain. And then the report that she quoted yesterday too was funded by the BC Hotel Association.
Yeah, that's not going to go away, is it? Those accusations aren't going to go away.
And then that's what Airbnb said too. You're using studies funded by the BC Hotel Association. And she did say, don't worry about short-term rentals, because we're building 36 new hotels in British Columbia. So you got more hotel rooms. And we've seen the price of hotels soar. They're up substantially. And then also during times of when they needed them, I think like a $200 hotel was going for like $3,000 for Taylor Swift. And the Caden, I think his name is Caden, if I remember, Rainville of the Interior Realtors Association said that, like they had a lot of people staying in Kamloops for the TMX pipeline that needed like short-term rentals, not long-term stuff. And it just got really, really tough to find that kind of like accommodation. So there you go.
Well, it's obvious that they're important. It's obvious that they filled
traveling nurses,
filled a gap in the market because they succeeded so much. That's obviously because people wanted that. Yeah. It's similar with Uber and the old taxi system, the old taxi companies. It's like Uber only came into existence because people wanted that. They wanted that new arrangement, and that's true with Airbnb. The demand was there. That's what's so strange about the counter argument. It's almost as if to say it just ignores what the people like voluntarily chose to do.
So the question was asked as well is like David Eby has talked about investment fleeing British Columbia, and then the question is like people for example in Kelowna invested in properties like Aqua, because Aqua was like a 3-tower project. One tower was designated Airbnb, and the other 2 towers were long term. And so people that bought in the 1 tower, Airbnb tower, it was zoned for it, approved for it, and that's how they made their investment. And the other 2 towers weren't that way. And then it was taken away. And so that's why, those people, will they invest here again? And, the towers the cranes are coming down in Kelowna for purchase properties, but they're not going back up. And now the vacancy rate is, approaching 10% here in Kelowna, like the real rate. So, so there you go. And the tourism is suffering because lots of people, like families, like to travel and stay in Airbnb so they can cook their own food. So there you go. Eleanor Sturko, BC Conservative MLA, very on this story all the time. And then here's another Vancouver man arrested after driving into the Pacific Coliseum entrance during Cirque du Soleil. All these things be like, we're seeing this over and over and over again, these copycat things where, we've seen it in New Orleans, and we've seen it just recently in Vancouver, driving into a festival, and we've seen it like in Europe, it's happening all the time. And she said it's only 40 days after a mentally ill man killed 11 people at the Lapu Lapu Festival. A man in psychosis drove his car into the entrance of the Pacific Coliseum.
Tragic. I mean, it's not like it started with the Lapu Lapu thing, is it? Because it's just been going on in a much less dramatic way, in particularly Vancouver, for ages now, hasn't it? Like just people being stabbed randomly, and just all kinds of horrible things, like people being set on fire and stuff like that. Oh. There's obviously, and it's almost always people who are from, who have mental health problems, as it's euphemistically referred to. There's something obviously like quite seriously wrong, isn't there? And Eby promised to fix this in the run up to the election. That was one of his big changes, wasn't it? It's like, no, I'm going to take this seriously now. And I remember he said like safety. People just want to feel safe in BC. That was like his main lesson that he'd learned when he was humbled by the BC Conservatives' popularity. But where is it? Where is this safety?
So what also was brought up there was the forestry. Companies aren't investing in forestry. And then the response from the minister was, the Trump tariffs have killed all, investment in forestry by companies. Well, Canfor a year earlier had said that BC is uninvestable. We did the stories, and they said because they can't get access to fiber, there's no certainty, so they will not be investing in British Columbia when they halted their planned investment in northern British Columbia. But now they're using Trump as the excuse, and this is a chart again from the BC Chamber of Commerce. Gavin Dew tweeted this, and he sent it to me as well. And this is the thing: like you're running out of people to tax. Like the corporations aren't investing, so you're not going to be able to tax them. But now like a lot of the young people are also fleeing British Columbia. So who are you going to tax?
Well, that's why. Obviously it's speculation, from a lot of gossipy people, but even Pierre Poilievre. But that's why people keep saying they might tax home equity, because like that's a very valid question that you ask. Where else are they going to get it? Like where are the sources now to extract? Because the easy thing to say is, oh, just tax the rich. But then the rich are the most mobile people in the world, so they just bugger off straight away, or they just fiddle with their taxes so that they're no longer registered to pay tax in Canada. It's not too difficult for them to figure out how to escape tax.
Yeah.
So then you're left with like the middle classes, the ordinary folks, and most people have most of their money in houses. So,
or why don't you say this?
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen. But
here, I'll help with the deal. Why don't you say, phone up Daniel Smith? You want a pipeline to Prince Rupert for bitumen? It's $10 billion, or $1 billion a year forever. Right? There you go.
Yeah. But then that's as we've said numerous times, that's like the irrationality of the ideology, or of the theology of the BC NDP and Liberal Party and others.
There's an everybody wins, or there's an everybody loses. But
at least you get to lose while feeling good about yourself and proud.
John Rustad, the leader of the Conservative Party, the official opposition in British Columbia, tweeted this out. EB needs to spend less time playing with balls and more time working to build a pipeline. Maybe I should have put this in the meme section here, but there's the first wood leather soccer ball at the Osaka Expo. Okay.
I mean, I don't think I wouldn't want to head that. Cut your forehead.
And then Brenda Bailey did talk about, in an interview I did with her in the past too, like you can go on Kelowna Now, you can find that, or NowMedia. I did interview, and then she did talk about, how they're very proud of, mass timber. But I mean, it's such a small market right now too. Mass timber, it has probably a really bright future, but it's very, very small right now. And then we got this beautiful picture of the Okanagan Valley here. I believe I took that a number of years ago, and it's about the Environment Canada. Warns of an early season heat event in British Columbia interior. So, there you go.
I thought the strangest thing is that they say like block the sun. It's like treating us like we're vampires or something.
Like Bill Gates, he's going to seed the clouds or something like that.
Yeah. Just dim the sun.
I think the biggest thing to do is be wary when you're out in the sun. That try not to burn yourself, and have an umbrella. Walk around with a parasol. Very, very, very popular in countries like Japan.
Yeah, all over the place. They also they really protect themselves from the sun out there, and yeah, it's like sometimes you see in countries like Canada that, and it happens in Europe as well, where there's no sun sense, is there? It's just like people are out there with their shirts off and stuff, but it's risky. But we're talking about like skin cancer there in part, aren't we? But this is heat. I guess the best thing to do is just stay in the shade. Yeah, stay away.
A little bit of sunshine is good for you though too, for vitamin D.
Yeah, well, more than that, it's like it's essential to life, really, isn't it? It is absolutely crucial. And that's something because I've wandered around East Asia quite a lot, and they really avoid the sun, like as if it's like evil almost. It's like a curse. And yeah, that's not the right approach, is it? Because then you just miss out on the sun's goodness. You gotta just get a nice balance.
I'm a sun worshiper, so there you go. Continued troubles with Interior Health. We got a letter from the BC Nurses Union, right? And the situation is just getting a lot of attention, well-deserved attention as well. And even Brenda Bailey said, there's lots of work to be done. Well, the BC Nurses Union stands in full solidarity with our members at KGH. We urge Interior Health to work with nurses and recognize that their experience and expertise must be part of the solution. Yeah, so lots of stuff going on there. And this is put out by the Conservative Party of BC. BCER wait times now are the worst on record. Patients are walking out without care. Nurses are burnt out. Staff are leaving. This is the legacy. They're obviously politicizing it. But the report finds wait times in BC emergency room continues to climb. And we've done tons of stories. This healthcare continues to be a problem. And again, this ties back to immigration. Immigration levels continue to be high, and yet our healthcare systems are completely stressed.
And yet again, like I'll bring up Japan again. We're told all the time that immigration will solve this health crisis, but the Japanese health system is loads better than ours, and they don't have mass immigration in Japan. But I would say as well, later on today, let's have a look, at 11:45, so in a little bit of time, the Minister of Health has called the press for a meeting, for a press conference, because she's going to make an announcement about the recruitment of nurses, doctors, and health professionals from the USA. So she's back on that again. as like Kelowna General Hospital falls to pieces and people warn that kids' lives are at risk, she's going to tell us about American nurses that are apparently going to come and work in the BC health system.
Josh is also working on a story. He did interview the CEO of KGH yesterday, so I think he's going to have that story up shortly if it's not already up. But he did interview her yesterday afternoon, but I don't see it up yet, so that should be up shortly, and her response. And then there's a couple columns up there from MLA Christia Lowen that's up there, and she promises an interview too. I spoke with her yesterday at the Chamber event as well. So